one of the needs that we saw was around the area of designing projects and those things. So that's why we had the webinar last week. And then we saw another need that everybody, when you shared your thoughts with us, was around this evaluation. And we know that all of our states are having the same need. We hear a lot of conversations when we talk about extension program about impact and all. And that's one of the things we want to do with the core, is to really help you find out how you go about measuring so that you can have a significant impact in whatever programmatic effort that you have. So that's one of the things we want to do with the core, is help you work in this area of evaluation, writing impact and measuring impact, so that you can score for your programs. And that's kind of why we have Scott and his team working with the extension to kind of help us do that. So I'll let Scott finish up what he's going to do, and know that we're all here to help you be successful in your programmatic efforts.
Great, thanks, Craig. I don't know if any of the other E-Extension staff or consultants has any comments that they want to jump in. I know Luann's under the weather, so I don't think she can talk, but let me just take that second, see if anybody has any comments. If not, I'm going to start some discussion points and open it up. And I said this is not a formal webinar. One of the things I've already done is, if you're not the team lead, if you're an individual i3 core project member, you got an email from me. If you're the team lead, you got an email from me, where we're trying to get some basic background information from each of the projects on what you're doing. We know most of you are part of a much bigger project, but what you're doing is part of this i3 core. So those are starting to trickle back in. I've probably got half a dozen responses out of about 70 emails at this point. So if you have not had the chance to do that, please get that back in. You still have some time. I think those were due next week, so we're still a week away on the deadline for those. But I think in the end, what we're trying to do is show some value from the work that you're doing. So we're not asking you, and I don't think it's probably even appropriate, given that most of you are working in a larger scale environment. I think the challenge that we would throw out to you is, what is one component, maybe two components? It really has to be your decision on what you're doing. What are those small pieces of what you're working on that you could share during and after this project, what we might call some high-level outcome or impact of your work? In other words, trying to get beyond some knowledge gained, possibly into skill or practice change, behavior change, and if possible into some form of impact, whether that's economic or social. So that's a challenge for a lot of people, but we don't want to make this such a grand scale thing that you can't provide some of that evidence. So even though you've focused with your i3 core projects, I think we're trying to ask you to focus a little bit more on your evaluation. We'll work to put these together. You'll have an individual level. We'll work to put these together amongst both the food systems and the climate change, and then breaking down within those. So it's going to be, it's going to be quite the challenge. Our time frame, most of you know, it's fairly short, and there's a lot of work and stuff that will be done when you join us in San Antonio at the end of March. And both Kevin and I will be there and have the opportunity to sit and visit with you one-on-one or in small teams, depending upon what you need and what you don't need. So in this process of sending out these emails, we're really gathering a lot of baseline data in regards to what we can do to help you. Kevin, I don't know if you have any additional comments you want to throw in from stuff you've seen in other evaluation efforts.
Not off the top of my head, no, but as people start discussing and talking about what they're trying to do, or maybe where they're at, we could definitely offer some advice or some assistance to them.
So I just had a chat message that I think basically asked, what have we seen so far, I think, in these early responses. And I haven't started responding back individually to the 6 or 7 that I received, and I'll likely start doing that today or tomorrow. But I think probably right now, what I've seen in the early responses is probably not enough information. So my responses back to you are probably going to get a little more specific by saying, if you say, we're going to look at changing practices, we may be asking you questions like, do you have 1 or 2 or 3 in specific that you're really looking for? It's a challenge because typically when we get involved in evaluation projects, we're thinking it for things that are much bigger and how many different things can we measure and tell this big story. I think that's a little bit different here with, I believe, 74 projects, if I'm not mistaken, roughly, that are being done, 120 something people total. Luann just said 70 projects, but I think there's 120 people involved. If we can get those key things from each of these projects, again, 1, 2, maybe 3 things from each project, the magnitude of what we can say across the board is going to be pretty extensive. So, you start taking 1 or 2 things from each project, we might have 70 to 200 different key points, either aggregated or not, that we can talk about across the board. So the goal again is trying to keep this thing fairly manageable in the time frame that we have, which is not very long in this process. So a lot of you have already been working on projects, and there's some really neat things out there, but I'm curious just to kind of see if anybody on the line has things that their thoughts of things they've had that have already been successful. I'm interested in hearing, what the major fears or challenges are, and if one person has it, 20 more probably has the same thing, and that's kind of the purpose of being able to get on the line today with, at this point, 44 people, just to start throwing around some of these ideas and some of these concerns and questions that you may have. So feel free to unmute yourself and throw a comment out there, because the thing I did not want to do on this session was do an evaluation lecture. That's not the intent of today's webinar.
This is Crystal Powers from University of Nebraska. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely. Crystal, go ahead.
One question I have for our team, it's kind of a 2-piece question. So we're part of an ongoing project. We're in our 5th year, and so we've already done some evaluation of our programming, but we each have picked out some individual things that we're going to do for i3 Core. So the first question is, how do we tie our i3 Core evaluation back to our larger project evaluation? Do they need to be different? Can they be the same? And then secondly, like I said, we each kind of picked out individual pieces to work on. We're still part of the same umbrella, but should we try to do a single evaluation of our team efforts, or kind of pick out, the top thing maybe from each individual's effort?
So those are 2 really good questions. You want the evaluator's response? It's the same for everything. It depends. So that's the typical evaluator response. But no, seriously, I think you got a couple opportunities here. So I think you certainly, I'm not a believer in double duty. So I think anything you can do to use current processes in the project that you've got ongoing that will fit the mold of what's happening in the i3 Core, you definitely want to do. You don't want to duplicate efforts. If it's a completely different process and piece and part of a project, tying it back might be, you've got your core evaluation stuff that you're doing with your current project, describing it as an additional piece or a separate pilot effort or a separate, there's a term I want to use, it's not coming to me right now, but kind of a discovery phase effort that led you to this new information as part of this other piece. So, we can work with you when you've got that data with your current project or your i3 project to see how they might tie together in an umbrella. The team, what I think I heard you say then is the team, yourself and a couple others, each have component A, component B, and component C of this I3 core piece. I certainly wouldn't do separate evaluations unless it's warranted. So, you don't want, especially if you're using the same target audience, you don't want to continue to bombard the same group with instruments or data collection if it's not warranted. But again, if pieces are very different, you want to stay as specific as you can, because I think that's one of the things, the challenges we have. And I'm in extension in Texas, and I've been here for 19 years and worked with a lot of agents and a lot of projects. And one of the things that I think we still continue to struggle with is we tend to try to treat things like they're the same. And so we start doing these evaluation approaches when we should have really done 2 of them, or we do 3 when we really should have done 1. And we really don't think about what's the implications of the data, of the process we're using, or the data we're collecting, or the strategy we're using to get what we're trying to get at. So without some more detail, it's probably a little hard to give you a real specific question. But I think, if I understand what you're saying, I would not duplicate for the purpose of duplicating, but I would be careful about putting things together that may not fit together. So that's probably not a great answer without the specifics, and we can chat via email. We could chat in San Antonio more about it and look at the specifics, either Kevin or I. But Kevin, I don't know if you have any other thoughts just on that.
Sure. I was going to say that evaluation can always be warranted if the results are going to be used. So if there's a separate component or this other evaluation that you want to do that that you're going to take those results and use that towards program improvement or towards developing a needs assessment for future programming efforts or anything like that, doing something that you're going to make adjustments or show the impact of something else, you can. So any other evaluation efforts that are done, just think about that end picture in mind. We do have some good stuff coming in the chat. I don't know if you've been watching that, Scott, but there was a question about the readership increase numbers as a worthy impact to start off with, and then there was a good comment about that that's more of an output rather than a measure of impact. We want to look at measurable change that's happening as a result of the program, not just the number of participation in the program. And then the question came back, Scott, and you may want to tackle this. How do you measure something if you don't have an economic impact?
Well, let's hit that one real quick. Not everything we do is going to have an economic impact. And again, kind of some history and experience we've had here, and there's at least one other individual from Texas on the call. We made the giant kind of leap with our eyes closed into the economic impact realm 10 or 11 years ago, and the culture when that happened was, if we weren't collecting economic impact, we weren't evaluating. If we weren't going to that level, and that's really a bad statement. It really needs to be, it takes good evaluation data to get to economic impact, and not everything we do is going to have that at the same time. So, some of your programs that you're doing are going to be more mature than other programs. And there's actually a question so I'm going to try to answer both of these at one time. There's a question that came a little bit later that said, if we're just getting started, how do we get to this, to these increases, or how do we get to economic impact? Well, sometimes it just takes maturity of programs. So, new programs are very difficult to get to that level, whereas programs that are more mature and have thought through that process and have the possibility of getting economic impact are going to be more likely to be able to do it. So I don't think our end result of what we're going to try to look for from y'all is necessarily economic impact from everybody. I think it's going to be dependent upon what you're doing and where you're at in that process. In some cases, getting to people, performing proper skills or adopting a practice is great, and that's where we're going to stop. Others may have projects that are much more in tune. So let me give you an example. If you're doing a farmer's market, and I can just think this has some of that possibility. Farmers markets that if you're in a community where there's been no farmers market and one of your efforts is to start that type of a process, that's got behavior or practice changes in it for people, but likely has some economic impact associated with it, just for the sheer fact of people are spending money, people are selling produce, they're profitable. It might be in a location where it affects businesses around where the market is. So that may have, that's a different approach than trying to start something, something in the climate change area may be very difficult to measure an economic impact in the short term. So I don't know if that completely got to the answer to that question, but it's very difficult to show in a short time frame. That was brought up in the text box. I think probably the bottom line of one of the things that we'll try to get across, and this will be a continued discussion, is we want more than the output. We want more than just people came, we distributed materials. We want to try to move into those levels of outcome that we can measure: knowledge change, skills adopted, attitudes change, behavior, practices, those types of things. So I think that's really ultimately where we want to go.
And so, Scott, the question came in too about the intent to adopt, that if people are self-reporting their intent to adopt a practice and what the perceived impact would be, do you think that's a fair methodology to use, or is there some other way that we can get more meaningful data of actual impacts, not just the intent?
So, another great question. We here have lived off of intent to adopt for, again, the past 10 years. That's catching up with us. Our dean and vice chancellor, who is over, over our director of extension and research, is now asking some of the questions. Okay, we've measured intention to adopt for a long time. What about actual adoption? The problem is that takes time. So you've got to be 1 year, 3 year, 5 year out of a program to really look at then actual adoption of efforts and to see, is it sticking over a course of time? We're moving to that, but again, in this project, in the I3 core, unless you're working on a project that's had a life expectancy already of 1 to 3 years, we probably can't get to that with you. So I would take what we could get, and I would certainly want to get to a knowledge, attitude, skills, intention to adopt. We'll definitely adopt. Whether we can tie that to an economic impact, I don't know. Some are, it may be tied to an estimator or a likely economic impact, but that's something that I think we'll have to work, kind of one-on-one with each project to determine whether or not the data is, valuable, or the data is strong enough to do that with.
And I think it's definitely fair to use the intent to adopt or estimated economic impact or any other impact, as long as when you're reporting it out, you make it clear that this is the intention or the estimation, and don't just put it out there in your report as this is our impact. Being clear on what you're measuring and what you're showing is an important part of that. And then as we follow up in the future, to follow that up with the actual long-term study.
So let me hit one more question. There was a question from Carlo that said, for those of us starting off with projects, what expectations are there for creating measurable impact? I think that goes back to, you're obviously, if you're starting off with a project, it's a young project, it's going to be harder to do some of these more long-term things with. But I would definitely want to work with y'all from the very start to see how can we move beyond that early collection of output, participation, satisfaction data into something that's a little bit more, that has a little bit more of the so what factor. Again, there's things that we can do and that are prior to adoption, the knowledge, skills, attitudes, the intention to adopt. So thinking a little more broadly and not on 15 or 50 different variables. Let's narrow it down to the primary focus of what you're trying to do. That's probably the hardest thing for any of us, because when we want to know something, we want to know something about everything. And one of the things we've done here, and we're working on an evaluation of a program here that's called Dinner Tonight, with a group of graduate students, and try to get them to focus on what do we have to have? What's required? Is there anything out there that, irregardless of anything, we have to know X? Then the second level is, what do we need to know? So, that's pretty important. The must knows and the need to knows are pretty important. The thing we got to stay away from is the nice to know. Those are the things that I think get us in trouble, because that's where the list grows really long. Oh, it'd be nice to know this. Well, yeah, but is it going to get us anything? Is it going to get us anywhere down the road? So let's focus on the requireds, the need to knows, or the must haves and the need to knows. And we'll work with you, excuse me, any of the projects that are, early, midterm, long-term projects to help do that. That's the role that we sit in this. And there'll be some others that we're recruiting in, some other evaluators from across the U.S. that we're recruiting in, excuse me, that will be part of this kind of consultant team for you to help you out. But right now, until that team gets fully built, myself and Kevin here, we'll be with you in San Antonio to kind of do whatever we can to help you through the process. Then the next question that came in was a question about policy. They said they're looking at policy adoption as a major impact, which does take quite a bit of time, and probably time beyond the I3. And they said, well, there will be an opportunity to follow up after I3 effort ends. My gut reaction to that is absolutely, just because, this project may end, continue doing what you're doing. I think there are hopes from the E-Extension staff that there's going to be, lots more opportunity to do things with these teams and stuff down the road. So, nobody knows what the future is going to hold, but I think you certainly don't want to give up on a great effort if you've got something going. I don't know if Craig or anybody wants to respond to that. That's a little bit out of my a little bit out of my realm, but I think that would be an answer that I would have heard from others.
No, you're right on track, Scott.
I think the ultimate hope here is that some of these innovative things that y'all are doing, and y'all were selected for a lot of reasons, but one of them was, a very innovative way to approach an issue in these two areas, that, your information is going to be very valuable to others that are not involved in this effort, doing similar type of work or other type of work down the road. So, this is a pretty select group, and there were people turned away from the Corps for various reasons, but y'all's projects fit a very specific niche of what's trying to be done, and were reviewed by lots of different people to get you where you are today. So it's pretty exciting, and it's a little different, and we're all experiencing some growing pains. It's very different for me on an evaluation, because usually we're in the ground, working with people, setting evaluation questions, and we don't have any of that control with y'all. You're kind of, that these are your projects. We're just here to give the best advice we can give as we all go through the next series of months. Kevin, a couple more have come in. Have you scanned?
So we've got a question about from Janet, talking about the idea of maybe helping out a school garden remediate a fire ant issue. What would you say that the impact, or maybe the indicator measure, would be on something like reduction of fire ants? If there's not a direct economic tie or something else, what might be an indicator we could use in that situation?
I can always leave it up to my buddy Janet to have a question like that. I can see her. She's laughing at me. So we're colleagues. So, but this is really an interesting situation here. There is an economic impact to fire ant management. And if you don't live in a state where you get fire ants, you probably don't understand what we're talking about. Maybe it's not one we can really talk about, Janet, a lot because of the population and where they're at, but there is certainly a social or environmental impact on kids. I mean, kids that can play in this type of, kids that are having gardens at schools and learning, and we don't have to worry about them getting, bit and stung by fire ants, is a pretty important piece. I mean, I know myself, I don't want to. I know others that aren't really impacted by them. The economic side would be, does a kid have to have any medical treatment from that? Some people are really allergic, to the sting of a very small, little fire ant. Others, it has no impact on them. So I think that's another one of these that we can sit and kind of talk through, but we want to tell the best story we can, but we don't want to go beyond what we're really capable of telling. So I don't think we want to say, control of fire ants in a school garden has saved the city of X, $14 billion in healthcare costs. That's probably not where we're going, but I think there's some things that we can do. Let me put one more disclaimer in. I've done evaluation work for a long time. Kevin's done quite a bit of evaluation work. Neither one of us are economists, and neither one of us are economic impact gurus. So when I get these types of questions, I go to a couple people we have in Ag Eco that really help us model from an economic impact level. I would encourage you, if you've got anybody and you're tied to anybody in an economic or an Ag Eco department, utilize them, because they deal with these types of things way more than most of us do. I know way more than I do. So we utilize them a lot to help us. Can we transition from this set of data to an economic impact indicator? When you're doing social indicators or social impact and environmental, it's a little bit more, mushy. It's a little bit more soft. But there are some people that react to that very well. So again, you got to know your stakeholders. You got to know what they're looking for, what they'll accept and what they won't accept. But I would encourage you not to venture too far out without the help of somebody that's got that economic background.
And there's the qualitative data has its place in evaluations, definitely. And something like this fire ant scenario that we're talking about, getting a quote from kids or the teachers or something could be a possibility to say, we hated going out to the garden and learning about agriculture because we were getting bit all the time, but because, we remediated the fire ant issue, now we're learning all kinds of things, and I understand where my food comes from, and I'm able to eat more healthy or something like that. So a quick survey to participants of, are you more likely to use the garden? And this is just one example, or what has the impact been on your life of this program? Sometimes those quotes, those testimonials from the clientele who have been affected can be important as well and show impact.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great point, and I'm glad you brought that up. And it actually leads me into just putting out some more advice and think about all the ways that you can collect data on your effort. I mean, it doesn't have to be a survey. As a matter of fact, maybe it shouldn't be. Can you do some observation and get very valuable data? Is there records already collected? Is there data already existing that's going to support the work you're doing? This example with the garden, just watching kids interact in the garden may be of value. Pictures and videos are an outstanding source of showing results of project work that has an evaluative side to it. The whole idea of testimonials or case study type evaluation, I mean, that all can play into how you collect data. Of course, there maybe needs to do the traditional survey or interview, but think outside the box of different things that you could use to gather evidence. So you don't always have to gather it in the same way. That's another struggle that I think we have in Extension, is if we don't do a survey, we didn't collect data. That's by no means a true statement, and one that we've got to continue to change the culture on.
Well, I think that ties very nicely into the question about the work with the small food producers who maybe aren't the best at collecting the data and or just see that as a very tedious thing to report their actual, increases in profit or their actual economic impact. And so there could be some other measures that you could use, or a case study of one who maybe is cooperative and who does keep that data and who does want to show that impact, working with a small group instead of trying to get that information from everyone and have them keep very detailed records. If that's not possible, there's ways to get about collecting that kind of data.
Very much so. And let me address another point that came up that, we're talking about a lot of end result evaluation, and certainly there's other things, but Luann posted a note in the chat that said, is there any value, basically, is there any value to using any type of process evaluation to show, the effect or of working in the core on the design or the project design of what you're working on? Going back to the previous question, it said, we're doing this as part of a bigger project. It's, I think that's something we're going to be asking you as this thing moves forward, is we're going to be asking you, what do these types of sessions where you're hearing things from other people, what does working in a area that's very focused on innovation to impact, has that had any impact on your projects and your processes? So that's that's maybe a little more internal to what we're doing, but it could also be internal to what you're doing. So always think about, if something happens and you think, wow, this would have never happened unless I would have been involved in this project, write that down, share that with us, because that could be very valuable. Keep a, some people are really good at journaling and keeping daily notes. Keep those kind of high points too, with your project, on things that happen that you think maybe as a result of what we're doing here. They may come across to be very valuable. There's another question about measuring the impact of online resources, videos, other than impressions and views. Boy, this is the $20,000 or more question these days. Is what does this whole technology learning network, how do we measure the importance of it and the impact of it versus kind of our traditional ways of teaching? And if you're doing, I kind of look at it two ways. If you're doing full-blown online courses that are the equivalent of face-to-face, they're just delivered with technology, to me, that's the same content, the same focus, the intention. You can collect that data and attribute it very similar. The thing that I think everybody's struggling with today is, what's the impact of Twitter? What's the impact of Facebook? What's the impact of geez, I can't even think, I'm at a stage in my life, I don't even know half the new ones that are out there. That's a question even the evaluators don't have the answer to today. Is that an educational tool, or is that a channel to get people to the educational tools? And I think there's an argument out there that people would say, some people would say it's one, some people would say it's another. I really don't see Twitter, even Facebook, as the educational tool. I see it as a channel that allows us to get people to an educational tool, whether it's online, face-to-face, printed information. There'd be others that probably would disagree, but I don't think we have a really good answer to that. I would definitely track your reach and your, what you can get out of that. I would use any tool I could to have that information in my hip pocket. It's whether or not I think we're going to be able to show a difference as a result of those tools. It's going to evolve, and maybe it evolves out of this, maybe some of the evolution will come out of this effort.
I almost wonder, Scott, about, if you're able to interact with some of those people who got those online resources to ask them the question, if this resource wasn't available online or in this medium, how do you think you might have gone and found that information? Because I think, just guessing, that some, especially a very technology savvy audience, might say, I wouldn't have gotten this information. I might not have been a person to go to a more traditional extension program in person, or I just would have done without. And so that could be something that if you get those kind of responses back, to show that this impact of reaching audiences who, in the way that they prefer to be reached.
Yeah.
So that, there's not maybe a hard science behind that, but at least demonstrating that this audience would have completely gone without this help if not for giving it to them in the method which they prefer.
So Becky Griffin just posted to the chat. If you can look at the chat, you'll see her message there that one of the things they were doing. So here's kind of a nice cross between Facebook and this kind of pictorial evaluation. Is they've been getting people to post photographs of garden spaces that they've done that looks like incorporates the behavior changes that they're trying to have people adopt to Facebook. So they're using these pictures, in my mind, as a little bit of a pictorial evaluation. People enjoy showing off what they're doing. They record what people have done. Great idea. So it's got a little bit of mixture of social media and a different way to collect data. Again, not having to ask people surveys. People can see, maybe it's the before and the after. Maybe it's as a result of efforts that are going on in the community. So that's something I'd like to hear a little bit more about as we kind of move down this path. But it's a great idea. It's a different way to do things, and it's really doesn't have much burden on the participants. They're posting stuff that they want to do. So great method. And somebody else posted that some projects are using SMS as educational approaches. I think you can trigger basic information that way, but you can also collect data back that same way too. So that could be a two-way street for you.
Are there others who want to share maybe some things either in the chat box or turn on your mic and feel free to talk of ways that you're collecting information or collecting data that you think are a very novel approach to impact that others could benefit from?
So my thought that this would be short and sweet is now 40 minutes in, and we're still getting questions. So I got another question here about development of YouTube virtual local food field trips. They'll be embedded into online local courses so people can assess the videos. Says perhaps there's a way to direct viewers to quick survey after watching. We won't get all to assess, but that's a tool that's been used for quite some time. If you can get a pop-up on your website or your course where people can they can ask the 2 or 3 simple questions. I think that's a great idea. This whole idea of virtual field trips is something I think is pretty unique, especially in today's realm. Some of our colleagues in Arkansas have done Kevin, you can remind me, the virtual soybean stuff work. So and they've had great success with going out in the field, setting up cameras, doing these virtual, and I think they're doing a lot for schools, but it can be done for anything. So that idea is really, it's pretty unique. It's a new way to do things that I think people like.
I think that YouTube comments tend to be kind of the graveyard of the internet. That's the lowest of the low of comments. So I'm hesitant to throw this idea out, but even at the end of the video, if it's available embedded on YouTube and not within the course, where you're getting a more formal evaluation, you could, given the audience, and you'd want to monitor this, just make sure you weren't getting crazy comments, but at the very end of the video, that last screen pop up a thing that says, tell us what you think about this video. Use the comment field below to type how you might use this, or one thing you learned from the video, or kind of at the end of a lot of YouTube videos, they'll say, like our channel, or follow us on YouTube for future videos, and use that time to also maybe request that people give you some very immediate feedback. It's not going to be great amount of detail in the comments, but people may kind of give you some gut reactions to what they're learning, or did this solve the problem that they were having, that they went and sought out information on YouTube in the first place.
Luann just posted a article out of Social Marketing Quarterly, which is called Connecting the Dots, Measuring Behavior Change with Social Media. It's a link in your chat. This is the first time I've seen this article. I saved it just now to take a look at it, but I think that's something else that, maybe a tool that some additional thoughts and ways to think in the future. So, this whole thing's evolving. I think there's been some really, really good comments posted in the chat and things that are brought up. Hopefully there's going to be lots of opportunity, especially in San Antonio, to network and share some of these ideas. What's good for one group is probably good for a lot of other groups, and the same thing, if we find a pitfall in one group, we may want to be careful and help another group avoid that bump in the road. None of this is easy. It's always a challenge. It's always a struggle. We're not going to be perfect at it, but I think based on what we're hearing, there's some pretty good minds out there that are thinking pretty seriously about this information. So we have lots of different ways to share this and lots of different opportunities. So I'm looking for anything else that's come in.
Another thing to do, talking about getting people to serve as those key informant interviews or in a focus group or things like that, is maybe finding some of those people via social media. So if you're doing a lot of work that is online or whatnot, and you've got some more active users, or people that if you ask them to, you make a very conversational Twitter or Facebook post and asking, hey, retweet and share one thing that you've learned, or one impact that's happened, or a way that this has helped you out. You can use that in and of itself, but you can also maybe direct message that person, ask them, would you be willing to participate in a little bit, phone conversation or something like that, where we can chat a little bit more in depth about how this has personally impacted you. So you can use social media as a way to kind of farm out some folks for more in-depth evaluation efforts.
You guys, I'm going to try to talk. I want to remind you that there's a Slack channel for evaluation. Scott set that up, and I guess I would encourage you to converse with each other in that channel, or with Scott, if you have any thoughts after this session is over. I don't know if you mentioned it before. I've been kind of dozy here, but I wanted to be sure to mention that.
No, I did not, but that's so let me hit on a couple of things. We're available anytime by email. So if you've got a question or need to, talk something through, email at the bottom of the emails that I've sent to you, or is my contact information. You can call me at any time. We have the Slack channel, as Luann mentioned, and it's fairly new, so we haven't had a lot of traffic on that. Starting a week from tomorrow, every Friday morning from, I believe, 9 to 10:30 Central Time, my own Zoom room will be open, and I'll have it kind of open and running in the background. So, you'll be able to come in and ask questions or get advice. I've got those scheduled all the way through March into the first part of April. And then, of course, in San Antonio, we're looking to have a spot for us to be kind of planted and to where we can help you. So a question came in, what is the Slack channel? I'm going to let somebody else try to answer that, Luann or Craig or one of the other eXtension staff. All I know is Slack is a way we communicate, but I'm not the Slack expert.
Yeah, Scott, this is Craig. the Slack is a communication tool, kind of like instant messaging and all, but it's a little bit more enhanced and a little more vibrant than what you get with instant messaging or Google Talk. And you should receive some information, or should have received some information maybe about that. We have some information available on Slack that will be shared with the i3 Core. We have a frequently asked questions sheet. I'm not sure, Luann maybe can chime in and say where that's located. But you each have accounts on Slack, and there'll be some onboarding sessions that Luann is going to do to bring everybody up to speed on using some of the tools that the Core is going to be using, and Slack just being one of them.
I typed in the chat, but everybody got an email invitation to Slack. So if you don't remember seeing that, search your email archives for Slack and accept the invitation to join. And then when you get in there, you'll be presented with channels that we've set up for the Core. One is this i3 Core evaluation channel, which I mentioned, and then there's also one for general i3 Core chat, and then one for climate, one for food systems, and we can add more as people need them. I'm thinking of setting one up for food systems, farm to school, so that all those projects can talk in there. And there, I'll post in the chat, there's a help to how to use Slack on our website. I'll post the URL for that as soon as I pull it up here. So get busy in there. It's a really good tool. It's a very informal way for you to interact with each other asynchronously about similar projects and concerns that you have about things like evaluation.
Yeah, Janet, I see your response in there, Janet, about you can't find the invite. I'll look it up in my email inbox and I'll forward it on to folks.
Okay, sorry. I'm sitting here talking and I had muted myself and I hadn't even realized it. So just jabbing away. Nobody's hearing me. So
It sounded really good, Scott.
yeah.
I can ask the Slack invitations to be resent out to everybody. Maybe that's the best thing.
So let me repeat what I was just saying. It's 10 till. I think it looks like most everything's been asked, and doesn't look like there's anything new. Do not hesitate to lean on us. Call us. We're not here to conduct your evaluation for you, but we're certainly here to be consultants to you and help you and give you the best advice possible. It's all of our best interest to learn of the great things you're doing and to help, and then pass that information on to others. Use our email, pick up the phone, call me, use our Friday sessions, spend time with us in San Antonio. We'll, use the Slack channel. We'll do everything we can. It can be a little overwhelming at times for all of us, but I think there's some great things to come, and I'm excited about seeing some of the efforts that y'all are going to have. I think you're going to have great results and great things that are going to be beneficial to the system across the U.S. So, Kevin, I don't know if you have any other comments, but if there's nothing else, feel free to start exiting out of the Zoom room, and we'll talk to you soon and be emailing you soon and see you in San Antonio.
Scott, let me answer just one question. They ask about Slack, and Slack, if you have it running in the background on your computer, you'll get a message on your desktop. Otherwise, you'll have to check it periodically to see what's going on. Thanks, Scott, for doing it. It's really good. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.